Captain Midnight.
So I've made videos about almost all my favorite Office episodes. I think there's a few out there that I still want to do, like Casino Night, but for the most part, I'm pretty happy with all the ground that I've covered there, from the Dundies to Dinner Party. So for this one, I felt like flipping the script a little bit. See, I just don't revisit the later seasons of The Office very much. Years ago, I rewatched a bunch of Robert California episodes for a video about him, but when I just feel like watching the show, the last 2 seasons are almost never gonna spring to mind. But I was on IMDB the other day and got curious, what is the single lowest rated episode of the series overall? Now obviously IMDB aren't like the end-all be-all of anything, but I think it does give me a good indication of where fans over time have felt like the real low point of the show is. At first, I was sure I knew the answer, like it had to be season 6's The Banker, right? That's a clip show episode that came long after clip show episodes really fell out of fashion or were seen as acceptable on network television. I mean, most of The Banker is literally just a greatest hits reel, but surprisingly, no. There was an episode that managed to fall below that, landing on the site with a 6.3 out of 10. And that episode is none other than Season 8, Episode 19, Get the Girl. I hadn't seen this one in years, so I just had to check it out again. I did have some fairly vague memories of it, and I just figured, like, could it be that bad? Before I jump in, thanks to everyone who has subscribed over the years, and if you haven't yet and you'd like to see more videos like this, now could be a great time to hit that button. So I think there's something very fitting about Get the Girl's cold open. We see Pam receive the news that a birthday balloon that's always been lodged in the warehouse ceiling is finally falling down, leading the whole office to gather around it and reminisce about better times, Oscar on his romantic glory days, and just generally about how much has changed over the years. It's a strangely bittersweet and nostalgic note for an Office opening, and for better or worse, it feels right at home in a show that had, at this point, kind of become a shadow of itself. But I should probably set the scene a little bit for people who, like me, just may not remember this one too well. It's comprised of 2 main stories, and unlike most episodes where you can pretty clearly delineate the A plot from the B plot, I would say they carry equal weight and more or less equal screen time here. In the first, Andy drives to Tallahassee to win back Erin, who's been working as a live-in maid for an older woman named Irene. He confesses his love, but Erin is understandably not thrilled about it since Andy hasn't even broken up with his current girlfriend. After some broad sitcom-y back and forth, Erin changes her mind and heads back to Scranton with him. But big things are happening in Scranton too, where Nellie shows up and just says she's the boss now. Robert California kinda goes with the flow and lets it happen, and she manages to bribe everyone with raises to just go along with it. Jim is the most upset about her taking Andy's job, but he's pretty powerless to do much of anything about it. So that's the basic setup. What's so bad here? Honestly, taken in isolation, I think there's moments that work fine. Like at this point in The Office, the show was pretty good at finding gags for its supporting cast and giving everyone a little moment to shine. Like Kevin and Dwight have some funny scenes. I like Dwight going along with his probably fake raise, justifying it to himself with a throwaway line about money not being real anyway since we went off the gold standard, or Kevin just getting really upset that Jim won't go along with cheering Nellie on like she's Tinkerbell. But I think why it finds itself at the bottom of the barrel in these ratings has a lot to do with the fact that this is 2 pretty unpopular storylines kind of emerging at once. I guess first I'll touch on that Andy and Erin relationship. I know many will disagree with me on this, but the elevation of Andy as manager was just a disastrous turn for the show. Like Ed Helms was in a big movie franchise with The Hangover, the show had him under contract, and it just seemed like they boosted him to the lead based solely off that. Because on paper, without star power consideration, no way you pick Andy Bernard as the new lead of this show. He may have a lot of Michael Scott's abrasiveness, but just none of his likability. I think Andy served his function well as a foil for Jim and Karen early on, but the more the show invested in him, I think the less those investments really paid off. And look, I like Erin. I always liked Erin. I think Ellie Kemper is better in Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, but she's still a really fun supporting character here. The little peek we get at her life in Florida, caring for Irene and forming a bond with this family, is unexpected and funny enough, even if the green screen is just horrendous. But I think the episode really struggles to justify her decision to return to Scranton. Everything Andy is doing here to win her back feels like this desperate and poorly thought out move, and for the most part, the episode seems to view it as justifiably doomed. But then she has a sudden change of heart that feels like a necessity of the plot, not really a choice that makes much sense for the character. Now you can write this off easily enough, like of course she makes a dumb choice, she's not written as a very smart person. But as a viewer, that's not a very compelling reason for things to go Andy's way, and it's pretty far from the effective romance storylines that this show used to be able to pull off. The larger issue here is that these two never made much sense at all. Andy is not nearly sympathetic enough to cheer for, and neither character is nearly as grounded as like early Jim and Pam, so their relationship has always just felt like a contrived sitcom story. And it's one that the show tried to shove down our throats over and over again. At this point, the show had just gone incredibly broad with its comedy, and that's even more apparent in the Nellie story. I think there's a version of The Office in those early years that could have pulled off this story well, because the basic idea is a good one. Someone new shows up to the office and just starts asserting authority that no one thinks they even have. And thanks to the absurdities of corporate culture, it just kind of works out for them. You know, something like Office Space. That's not a bad idea for an episode, but it doesn't work here because Dunder Mifflin left behind any pretense of feeling like a real workplace a very long time ago. Nellie feels like a cartoon character, complete with an anecdote about stealing a Formula One car that feels like a Family Guy cutaway gag. And again, Robert California also feels like a cartoon character, just going along with her plan. Any connection this could have had to satirizing actual office culture just isn't there. One of my least favorite things about Season 8 is how it puts so much narrative weight on characters like Robert California and Nellie, who are so over the top that any action they take can be justified by how wacky they are. Nothing is out of character because there wasn't a consistent character there to begin with. This also means that longtime cast members like Jim, Pam, and Dwight are reduced to purely reactive roles, responding to Nellie's wackiness and not much more. Nellie and Robert California are just so cartoonish that they can never really feel like they're part of the more grounded ensemble. Rather than becoming more and more defined as The Office goes on, they kind of feel like intruders in a show where they just don't quite fit. I think that, more than anything, is where that sense of character inconsistency comes from. Their motivations and personalities tend to just shift to accommodate whatever a given episode requires of them. And this all would have felt very out of place in a Season 2 episode, but it's pretty par for the course at this point in the series. Now, does this mean the episode deserves to be the absolute worst rated one ever? I mean, possibly. At least The Banker is filled with absolutely great moments of television, even if they're in old clip form, and I can see why people responded to this one like they did. Because Get the Girl is The Office's decline summed up in 22 minutes. It's a decline not marked by some hugely catastrophic failure, but by the disappointment of diminishing returns. It contains so many of the recognizable elements of what made this series special, but they're undercut by the kind of broad comedy that would have felt out of place in an earlier era. I think it illustrates the difficulty of maintaining a sitcom's sense of identity over such an extended run, especially when they're trying to scramble to make up for losing a character as important to the show as Michael Scott was. How forced and contrived a lot of this feels just seems like the product of writers struggling to find new stories to tell within this framework, while trying so hard to preserve what audiences loved about the series. Now, I know some will disagree, but I think the show at least had a mild bounce back with Season 9. Overall, though, The Office's legacy, in my mind, will always be those first 4 seasons. And seriously, if you have a lot of love for 2000s TV, check out my almost 30-minute long podcast on the new Buffy Hulu series. It's called Midnight Musings, and it's my outlet for rants I just need to get out there. The next episode will dive into the absolutely abysmal state of the Madden franchise mode, why it's so awful, and how Fire Emblem, my personal favorite JRPG series, could offer a solution that would inject new life into a game that desperately needs it. You can find Midnight Musings on Nebula, because it's just the ideal platform for exploring topics I can't usually cover. Plus, you can watch all my videos ad-free. Nebula also features creators like Nando V Movies, Man Carrying Thing, and Lindsay Ellis. I wanted to give another shout out to her new Nebula exclusive video here, Trash Disney Attraction Rebrands. I think what works so well about this one is seeing just how slapdash plans in the Disney parks can really be. I won't spoil anything here, but seriously, check it out. Some of what they thought they could get away with is just breathtaking. Right now, Nebula is a great deal. You can get a yearly subscription for $36, about $3 a month, which is 40% off. You'll also get guest passes to share for a week of access with your friends and family. Sign up by visiting go.nebula.tv/captainmidnight, scanning the QR code on screen, or using the link in the description or pinned comment below.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.